Well, Rory McIlroy, I think, has many reasons to be motivated, including the specter of Brooks Koepka. And earlier today, Rory McIlroy was asked about the prospects of Brooks Koepka being on the U.S. Ryder Cup team.
John was asked yesterday, and Patrick Cantlay was asked yesterday about the Ryder Cup and about the prospect of having live guys. You've said in the past that you don't think they should be able to play in the Ryder Cup. Do you still feel that way?
I mean, I certainly think Brooks deserves to be on the United States team. I think with how he's played, I mean, he's second in the U.S. standings, only played two counting events. I don't know if there's anyone else on the live roster that would make the team on merit and how they're playing, but Brooks is definitely a guy that I think deserves to be on the U.S. team. But I have different feelings about the European team and the other side and sort of how that has all transpired. And yeah, I don't think any of those guys should be a part of the European team.
Call it the Brooks Koepka exception, perhaps, for Rory McIlroy.
And there'll be some American players thinking that Rory is just sowing the seeds of a little mischief here and that get the live guys on that team. But he is making a point, and it really does reflect the reality of either team is not equal here. It's a PGA of America event over here.
Right.
It's a European Tour event on the other side. The European Tour owns that half of the Ryder Cup. And so those guys aren't actually eligible for now. Some of them, in Sergio's case, haven't paid their fines. Others have resigned. None of them were playing particularly well enough, unlike Brooks Koepka, to justify making the team. The only one that Jon Rahm seems to want on the team is Sergio. And Sergio is the most toxic person you could put on the team. He insulted the tour and players on the way out the door. He is not welcome in a Ryder Cup locker room. And
Amazing.
John talks about how politics are part of that. Well, maybe, but personality is a big part of it as well.
I think Rahm also appealing to the heart and soul and maybe nostalgia, talking about the great Spanish duos of the past and still wanting that to exist. But I tell you what, all the litigation that we're seeing between these two sides, I still think that at the end of the day, for the American squad, it's about finding a way by hook or by crook to break this streak of losing. No wins by an American team in Europe since 1993. That's before a lot of these players were born.
But a lot of guys like Zach Johnson and a lot of those players will say, show me one weakness. That was in the President's Cup team that whooped up on Trevor Immelman's international team last year. It was a tight, cohesive unit, both in terms of how they performed and in how they interacted with each other. There was nothing wrong with that chemistry. Zach Johnson's going to be a little bit leery of perhaps, juggling that a little bit by introducing a live component, even if it is someone who is like Brooks Koepka, high on that points list.
Is he also exempt, though, because of not just the way he played and winning a fifth major championship, but he's been kind of agnostic? He hasn't been necessarily anti-PGA Tour on the way out the door?
It helps in a way that Sergio's on the other end of that extreme on the European side of things as well. Ultimately, if Brooks Koepka qualifies on points, then he ought to be on that team. It becomes more of a debate as to whether or not he ought to be on the team if he requires a captain's pick. And I think that's a dicier situation for Zach Johnson, considering the guys he has around him, like Davis Love, Jim Furyk. Those are absolute PGA Tour loyalists.
The thought has always been that the European team has more cohesion. As we sit on this late date in May, which team has more drama surrounding it? Obviously, the teams aren't set yet, but which franchise, as it were, has more drama at this stage?
The only team that actually has drama is the US team, because it's the only one that's likely to have a live guy in the frame in Brooks Koepka. Sergio said on the record that Luke Donald told him he's not making a Ryder Cup team. None of those guys were playing well enough to be on the team. They're not eligible. They're not in the frame. It's not a debate, no matter what Jon Rahm wishes it were. It's not a debate on the European side. It's very much a factor on the US side.